Welcome to episode 18 of the Community Cloudcast, December of 2022. My name is Eric Shupps. I'm joined by my fellow co-host, Paul McCollum.
Hello.
And Jason Himmelstein.
Howdy.
Jason, it's been a while since you've been with us. What have you been up to?
Just working for a living, man. You know how it goes. I mean, it's a new job, running kids around all over town, traveling the world, all that fun.
I hear that. In fact, Jason and I just got back from Portugal recently, where we did one of our Collab Days events. Love Portugal. It was a great time. It was your first visit. What did you think?
I loved it. Can't wait to be back. I mean, just fantastic experience. Just had an absolute blast with the people. It's beautiful city. Really enjoyed everything I got to do, especially the hospitality. Our friends Rodrigo and Lourdes and the whole crowd from that from the Lisbon community, but especially right there at the end, we went to dinner right on the beach, and it was kind of an ugly night. The clouds had rolled in and it was kind of rainy, so we even had to move inside. And then all of a sudden we just finished the meal, and I was sitting there talking to Lourdes and Rodrigo, and all of a sudden they brightened up, like light shining on them. I was like, did the clouds just break? And you turn around and there's the sunset. And so we went down to the beach and stood there and took pictures and really enjoyed the sunset. You turned around and there's a double rainbow over the restaurant. Just the perfect way to end our time. Had a wonderful experience and can't wait to go back.
Yeah, it was really, really good. When Lourdes says she's going to have a sunset, there's going to be a sunset. That's just all there is to it. Yeah, really great experience. One of my favorite places for sure. Well, speaking of things done in 2022, that is the gist of this month's episode. So let's do a little housekeeping first, and then we'll jump into the content. Just a reminder, third Thursday of every month or thereabouts, a new episode will be released. You can monitor us on our YouTube channel, on our Facebook page, and of course on our website at communitycloudcast.com for all the latest and greatest. Thank our sponsors, Aptigent, Power Tools, for bringing this to us every month. I've got a huge Salesforce update coming here in the next few weeks. So that'll be some big additions on that platform, lots of new actions, things happening over in Salesforce land. And also the releases are in the pipeline for Power Platform, for Power Automate, Power Apps, some new stuff on the free community edition as well as the pro edition. So those just waiting on Microsoft to get those all deployed. So those are coming up. And joining us unexpectedly and out of the blue is our favorite Canadian, Mr. John White.
Hey, also only Canadian.
although
you're the only Canadian. Did something happen?
Canadian. That's how you get to fly with me, John. Is you're my emotional support Canadian.
I know.
I'm making a vest for you right now, actually.
Nice red one with handles.
Hey, look, if I get to fly for free, that helps.
So John is a recent immigrant to the great state of Hawaii and is spending all his time down there avoiding the Canadian winter, I think is what he's doing.
I wish. I'm in the Great White North right now. I will be there in a couple of months, but I'm not there yet right now.
Yeah, well, great place to hang out. It's a tough life when you have to fly to Hawaii and get away to your...
I know. It's finding the time. Who's got it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this month, we'll be doing our typical end of year wrap up where we just talk about things that have happened in 2022 and then looking ahead to the next year, just to give our thoughts on what we see happening in our space and whatnot. And John, just before you came on, Jason and I were chatting about the recent trip to Portugal, which was a first for Jason and a first for yourself as well, and the great event that we did there. And then you all went on to Denmark, I believe, did another event there. We had some great events this year.
A lot more than last year.
Yeah, at least in person, right?
Oh, yeah. That's the only way I'm doing it these days. I'm tired of the virtual, and this is lovely. and I miss you all dearly. And so this is fun to get together and do, but it's all in person for me going forward. The virtual stuff, I do virtual meetings all the time, every day. I'm on a camera for these events for community. It really needs to be in person. That's what community is, not a virtualization.
Yep.
You know, the hypervisor that the community was running on, I think needs to be replaced with reality. So, you know, I not enough cores, not enough RAM. Let's switch it back to some physical.
It's not compatible with the ARM chipset. Everything is going to ARM, and
bare metal.
We'll have to wait a while.
If I never see another pre-recorded session, it'll be too soon.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that. Now, Paul, your user group though has been going pretty strong in person for most of this year. I mean, you still got plenty of people showing up.
Yeah, we're up to about 50-50. I still have a couple of my guests from Morocco that show up pretty regularly. But I run the event hybrid. So I think we hit our stride at about 15 or 20 people in person, and another 15 or so online with a virtual speaker. So, but yeah, I think what was it, February, March that we started back up in person. So.
Yeah, great. And another event that we should mention was we were all in Germany, most of us anyway, not too long ago, in Mainz for the Cloud Summit. And that was a great event, a great turnout for that. Unfortunately, a whole bunch of us got sick at that event, but nevertheless, it was a great turnout.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I was in today, I was in the Advent calendar for European Collaboration Summit. That's going to be in Germany in May. I'm looking forward to that.
Not even a little bit of irony to that one, is there?
Hey, you know, I did ping Alice to find out, hey, are you putting the Jew in the Advent calendar? And if so, can you do it on my mom's birthday? Because that made her day when I showed that to her. I was like, look, Mom, I'm in an Advent calendar. She died. Well, not died. She's getting older and everything. She may be watching this. You never know. Happy birthday, Mom. We had a nice time hanging out today.
So I think one of the points we can bring up straight away is that 2022 is finally the year of the return to in-person conferences. Jason said, thank goodness for that, because that virtual stuff was getting old. At the same time, we saw less conferences than we have in the past. I think there were too many before COVID. COVID pretty much wiped them out, and I think the good ones are sort of bubbling up to the top. So do we agree that it's good to be back in person and with fewer conferences on the calendar?
Completely agree.
Yeah, I'd like to see the big ones back, for real, not this fake half we want to save money, approach. But yeah, quality over quantity for sure. But I do think Microsoft needs to get back in the game.
Well, speaking of, I did attend Ignite this year, which was relatively well attended. I don't know what the final count was, but there had to be a good 5,000 people or so there. A little bit of a strange setup, not quite what we're used to, certainly at an Ignite. It was good to see people back, but it felt like they hadn't quite found their footing back again for the big in-person events.
Yeah, it's like they're doing it with one hand tied behind the back. Yeah.
Hopefully that gets improved. Paul, did you end up going to the big Salesforce shindig?
Not the big one this year. I've had other pursuits that I've been focusing on, so I decided to let this one go. But this one did seem pretty big. The year before was kind of a toe in the water. I was one of only I think less than 6,000 people at what normally is a 175,000 person event. I didn't hear what the tally was this year. I still got to check into that and see how that went. But it looked as big as the ones in the past, so they seem to be recovering. We'll see if they implement all the local ones again this year that were very much virtualized over the past couple.
So they're able to pull it off.
Yeah.
They seem to have a pretty well-oiled machine and those events are massive. 100,000 people back in the heyday. I mean, they were.
That's insane.
Huge.
Yeah, 175,000 was the last one pre-COVID. Biggest software conference on the planet. I think, I think in Taiwan, the Mobile World Conference, which is more hardware, is technically bigger, but that's the only one.
Wow.
Oracle Open World, but I think they were catching up. They were hitting 140, 150,000. But Dreamforce was still a little bigger.
I'm curious, how big is CES? Because I know, like, but with that one, people flow through. They don't. It's not a full like, hey, you're coming for all these sessions kind of a thing. But that, if I'm not mistaken, that has a huge flow through number.
Yeah, that's Vegas, and
that.
it's multiple technology, and it's just kind of put on as like a fair. It's not like, I don't know, it's not reserved. It's kind of it's maybe a buy your ticket thing for CES.
Yeah.
And what was the other one before that CES? I was supposed to go to CES one year, and there's the other one.
Back in the day, it was Comdex.
Comdex, yeah.
Comdex. God, I thought there was another one that got canceled. That was a long running tech conference in.
Lotus Sphere was a huge one for a while.
I used to go to that one all the time.
What, 3 something? E3?
Oh, E3, the gaming conference.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What's that?
Yeah.
I thought that was
that's a big one,
closer to CES, but anyway, yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think CES had those numbers. I'll have to go check and make sure. Those aren't technically a software conference, so.
No, definitely not. I was just more of a question than
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what the peak is. We hit at any one conference. I guess the Ignite, the one year that had some 20,000 people at it, probably. But I suppose in the Microsoft space as well, we have so many different conferences. I mean, you could throw a dart at the calendar and hit 5 Microsoft conferences on any weekend of the year, really.
Or 2 on the same weekend, apparently, at some point.
So, well, let us hope that continues into 2023. I'll make my own prediction on that for this. I think that we'll continue to see a little bit of shakeout on that market, but I think we'll start to see some of the smaller community conferences come back to life in person. Our Collab Day schedule is already starting to fill up for next year, so I think that's good. I think we'll continue. That trend will continue, barring any other catastrophes. But that's my prediction on the conference space for 23. What say y'all?
I don't know. We'll see. I'm interested to see how the return to work costs affect conference attendance. So I don't know. Do you think people got more ability to go to conferences or less while they were saying they couldn't go anywhere, they couldn't come into the office?
Well,
I don't know.
Yeah, I think as we're seeing budgets get locked down, as we're seeing companies not being willing to let people travel because of financial reasons, which they're blaming on the economy at this point, not on COVID or anything else, but just from we're trying to preserve jobs and we're not letting people travel as much. We lived this way for a while. So I know lots of companies that are saying no travel. In fact, I was talking with a friend yesterday. They literally put a complete moratorium on all travel at this point. And there's not even a hotel room night can be approved without like board approval, kind of a level thing. Yeah, I haven't run into that in my job at this point. Where like if there's a customer thing I need to go to, I'm being told, yeah, you need to go to whatever you need to go to. And we do get asked, is this business critical? And whether we answer yes or no is not necessarily a negating factor, but it's just a question of how is it, where is it, kind of a thing. But as far as the prediction is concerned, I think local events are starting to come back where people aren't having to travel. I think we'll start to see that because you can get to do that. The old SharePoint Saturday style, the Collab Day style thing where it's a local event that you're able to get to, and you don't have to take a day off of work necessarily, or if you do, where some things are happening on Fridays or whatever. I think we're going to see that happen more often in the bigger cities. Maybe not as much in, like I did Albany, New York one year, where I gave 4 sessions in a day, and there were 22 attendees. But I don't know that we're going to see that kind of a thing come back, but more the larger cities. saying, "Hey, let's bring people together. Let's have that user group style conference event happening here." But I think we'll see the larger events come back, maybe in a smaller fashion, though. Still, because of the economy statement, I don't know where people are going to be sponsoring. Where's the marketing budget going to be? Is it still going to be there or not? So I'll be interested to see it. I know there are some big conferences already announced and scheduled, ECS being one of them. Ignite's already been stated that it's going to happen, but probably again in a hybrid fashion. We know that the EduCon conferences are already announced and scheduled. As you said, some of the collab days. So I think people are seeing the bets happening out there as well. I know that M365 Conf is going to try and do its thing again at the beginning of May. So we're seeing those stakes being put in the ground, but we've also seen those things get pushed out. So I don't know. We'll see.
We got a data point with the Power Platform Conference in September last year, which to the casual observers looked like a Microsoft conference. It wasn't, but I think a lot of people thought it was, and they flocked to it. I mean, we haven't had those kind of numbers in our sessions for a long time. There were a lot more people showed up at that and I think it was partly because there was that impression that Microsoft was doing it, which made it okay. And to the extent that it's okay, or it's one thing for the community to have it's great you get the hardcore, but I think it's hard to convince your boss to go to some conference that's not sponsored by Microsoft in some cases, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. And I know, I mean, coming back to Ignite, one thing we always hear is how many registrations we had, and something we also know about free events is that only about 30% of the people show up that register for those events, right? The engagement level just isn't there. I mean, how many of these webinars have you been on when something else shiny caught your eye and it just ran over in the side, on another monitor? And to that end, I mean, we've got that the Twitter analysis, and we ran that for Ignite this year, and we saw about a quarter of the engagement, basically a quarter of all of the numbers, compared to the 2019 Ignite, the last one was fully in person in Orlando. So with 200,000 registrants, you still had a quarter of what was just under 20,000 people in person. And when you think about how much easier it is to tweet, when you're just sitting in front of your computer all the time.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to change up how we measure, though, John, with the...
I know, but at the time, it was still Twitter.
So I brought up return to work. But so my hypothesis on conferences and user groups, and I'm throwing it against the wall for people to shoot down, has been that the market is too good. That people are able to not worry about their jobs and not worry about differentiating themselves or extending themselves in conferences. They're able to worry less about career and more on family and spare time. Do you think that's tugging people away, or am I crazy?
Well, you might have a point. For me, it's I like going to these conferences. That's where my friends are. But I mean, that there may be something to that.
I think the travel budget thing is the big one, right? We can't pull off these big conferences unless people have paid travel, because it's just not going to happen. And so that could be the real nail in the coffin, as it were, for many of these types of events. But hopefully some of that gets released. But as you say, it's an economic issue now. If it goes down to travel budget versus preserving 3 or 4 jobs, well, I think it's going to land on preserving the jobs, would be my guess.
Well, even the small ones and the free ones that don't have budget, or even the virtual ones that can go on during the day, or I've seen drop-offs in attendance and hosting of those, because I just don't feel like people are motivated to go do that kind of stuff too. So
there might be a bit of screen fatigue too.
Yes, very good point.
Could be.
Well,
let's talk a little bit about some of the technology movements in this last year. We've got a lot of Power BI and just BI in general representation this month. So, John and Jason, what were the big things that happened this year in the BI space, and what do you think will be the big thing for next year?
He's cutting the grass of our next podcast, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. So this is the teaser for the next bifocal show. We actually are going to be recording that next week. But let's so the things that happened this year. There's been a lot of goodness. Most importantly,
Paycheck valued.
Yeah, my other note card is this one, just in case you were wondering later. Save that one. But no, for me, I joined the product team, and so I see things very differently than what I did in the past. And it's a lot about where our future is, where we're going from here. A lot of organizational changes that have happened in the recent couple of weeks, in the last 18 months, that have really shifted the landscape. It's really cool to see what's happening with the company. But from a Power BI perspective specifically, to me, it's more of a focus on the end user and usability. We got some really cool features like the embedding in PowerPoint that are very focused on a user. How do people use this thing? How are they spending their time, and what do they want to be able to do? Well, lots of folks in business spend time in decks, right? They're in PowerPoint decks. So rather than making people jump out to go do something somewhere else, let's make it so that they can get to the insights and the data that they want to be able to show off in that meeting without having to jump out and go open a web browser and hope you're going to the right thing. But instead, let's interact directly in PowerPoint. So that one to me was really huge. We focused a lot in on making things easier. And by doing that, we made things harder. To be honest, the formatting pain, there was a re-architecture, rewriting that had to happen to be able to bring us some really cool new features that are dropping in the first quarter of next year, hopefully, around on object formatting. But we brought a new formatting pane and new capabilities therein to people. And then most importantly, in the month of November, it's now we have a new accent color of teal. Nothing else matters. It's all about the teal. So if you like that,
hold on. Is that that's not
as
NDA?
A SharePoint guy, I like the teal. Like
It's
for
out
me,
there in the wild.
So it's there. We've now done 2 drops with it, so go check it out. It's the new accent color, and it was for accessibility purposes. And I joke about it, but a lot of the things that we've done are focusing in on making this more accessible to the end user, more focused on the end user. How do we make things more Office-like? Including now we're deploying out as a part of Office. We moved paginated reports into Pro, so it's no longer a premium feature. That to me was really huge. It's something that when I joined, they said, we're working on this. I said, hallelujah, because that's going to drive adoption and usage. And it's a big gap for people that they didn't want to have to pay for. So that's now a Pro feature that's included in the Pro licensing. And it just, the product keeps getting better. And where we're heading over the course of the next, let's call it 16 months, is really exciting to me. And I'm gonna throw this one back up on the screen. There's certain things I can't talk about because I do value the paycheck. Just like John values his MVP and can't talk about certain things as we always have. But I will say my excitement for where we're going in the BI space has never been higher.
Yep,
and it's really cool.
There's a couple of things too that we did see this year that that kind of hint at some things, and I'd say there's 2 big features from my standpoint. It was in the spring we saw the preview of data marts that showed up, and without getting into all of the details of what it is, it buries the lead a little bit is because we start to see some functionality that lets us build these data sets right in a browser. Now, I don't want to say you can build a data set in the browser, but you get a data set with one of these data marts and you can tweak it. So there's some changes you can affect to data sets from directly in the browser. And that's not something you had any ability to do before. And that I think speaks, I don't think that's the ultimate journey, but we know that the team is moving toward a completely browser-based experience. Taking everything you can do today in Power BI Desktop and letting you just do it within the service. That's a big one. And another
That said,
feature,
we're not getting rid of Power BI Desktop. It's just
No.
we want it to be
No.
have the same experience from what you have in desktop to be able to do it in the web. So that it brings people like Mr. Shupps, who
for those darn Mac users.
You get that Mac experience where you're going to be able to do all the things in Power BI that I can do on a PC. You'll be able to do that through the browser and the web. So,
and the other one for me, the big feature is hybrid tables that showed up this year. And hybrid tables really completes the loop on the real-time story. And again, without getting into all of the details, you can import. That's how most people use Power BI. They import data into a data set. You query from that and you keep it refreshed. There's also a direct query story where you take that cached data out and you're going directly against the source data, which is got currency value, but it's also a performance hit, and it's a big load on the back end systems, etc. Hybrid tables let you kind of put both of these things together, and so you can have the efficiency of this imported model at the same time you have the currency of direct query, and that is a huge deal for people who have massive sets of data. They need to query, but they need to keep it up. They need to query it in effectively real time. So those are a couple of big ones for me.
So, Jason, you're talking futures around end user accessibility and sort of bringing Power BI to the people, which has to be a good thing. And I know you were just making fun, but really, there's a whole user segment there that is BI is unapproachable to them because it's just specified or a specialist tool set, specialist knowledge, right? All that sort of stuff. I know how to work with big data and slice and dice data sets and all that stuff, but I know diddly squat about Power BI, right? So getting in and working with the tool would be a fairly steep learning curve for me, to be honest. So anything that can improve and ease that process, can do nothing but increase adoption across the board.
I completely agree. I do joke about the Mac user side of the world, but from a consumer perspective with Mac users, and the reality is that there have been specialized tools for specialized things forever. If you're doing real good high-end graphics work, you're not doing it on a PC. That's not been the path, right? There've been, if you're making movies, if you're doing CAD work, things of that nature, probably wasn't a PC you were working on. When you're working with data visualization and data modeling and things of that nature, likelihood is you are doing that on a PC. It's not as Mac bound. So the realities of those things, the segmentation for me has never really fallen on solid ground. But the goal is to be able to bring that. Now, the end user story of I have data, I want to be able to visualize that. Somebody has done the modeling, and now I want to be able to work with it. That's where we're trying to get to. Is you have data, somebody has given you a data set to be able to work with. How do you work with that? How do we make it more approachable? How do you have SharePoint list data and be able to visualize that in a way that makes some sense? How do you have Salesforce data that you can go into and just quickly get to? And that's where the goal is. That's where things need to become more approachable. And again, all of the Salesforce side of it has some modeling functionality that has to come into play, right? But the realities are, in a lot of these other cases, it's about giving access to people where we have presented data. And one of the cool things that came out over the course of the past, let's call it 16 months, it's called the Data Hub. It's called the Data Set Hub for a little while, and now it's called the Data Hub, where in Power BI, you can go in and discover data sets that you have access to and other data elements that you have access to and build reports upon that data set that's already been crafted for you. So instead of you needing to be able to go in and learn how to do and go, everybody has to go craft their own. No, let's make data more discoverable. Let's make it something that's more approachable, where I went off and I spent hours and hours creating a data set, doing all the joins and everything else, pulling all the data together. And now all you want to do is be able to visualize a report and actually understand and drill into the data. Rather than creating the same thing I just created, let's make it so that you don't have to do that. Let's make it so you can see what's there and go from there. That's part of the goal. That's what we've been working towards. And I think that we're good 60% of the way down that path. There's still a long way ahead to get to truly good and to get to even better, to be great. But we're far down the path, in my opinion, down that story path.
And Paul, is that a similar story over on the Salesforce side? I mean, as little as I know about Power BI, I know even less about Tableau.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure there is, and I think those are constant attempts to try and build approachable, discoverable data models that you can pull in and work with easily. And Jason's on mute. The other piece, just to pile on that, is and the highly graphical, highly conceptual stuff that that data visualization and business intelligence require. Moving that into PowerPoint is a great step forward into making it usable and more reusable during conversations. The other step that I'm seeing that's kind of moving in parallel with simpler data and simpler concepts is bringing that approachable, findable, requestable data into the collaboration tools like Teams and Slack. And so being able to write those simple queries, hey, having AI interpret what you mean by where are we at on our sales target this week, and not have to go into 95 different reports and try and interpret 30 different data models that are out there, but kind of pre-chewing some of those concepts and making those available for people can use them and gather the summary more quickly, as opposed to trying to go into tables, try and learn what triangle counts are before they can figure out what a trend they should be working towards, how they should be directing their team. So I'm enjoying seeing all of the integrations into the conversational data flow that's happening. SharePoint was great. It brought us all to the same place where we could work by ourselves on a bunch of different data. Teams is trying to bring us together to work together, and sharpening those tools and making them easier for all walks to go in there, I think is going to be something we're going to see a lot more of. Continued investment in Teams and pulling that data in, not just to PowerPoint, but into even more conversational and less document-driven representations.
Now, Paul, when you say teams, are you talking capital T teams? Or are you talking lowercase t teams?
Capital T teams. Like instead of just viewing not just viewing a PowerPoint document in Teams, but being able to have a conversation and say, like with Giphy, if I want to say I want to show an I'm angry or Jason's on mute GIF, I can just type Giphy and I can go select that. If I could do that with sales that easy, and have something that's searching, finding that in, as opposed to having to know which is the current PowerPoint, where it's stored inside of SharePoint, that would be true power. If we're able to do reporting and BI at the same ease that we can do frowny faces, hopefully that would be transformative.
You want HAL, basically, is what you're asking for.
And if you saw that chat GPT stuff that was going on, HAL's out there.
I feel like we're getting a lot closer to Skynet being a real thing. And
I'm sorry, Paul. I'm afraid I can't do that.
My CPU is a neural net processor, a learning computer.
Well, let's talk about one of the predictions we made last year. Slightly switching gears here, but that is we talked about around this time last year about the rise of low code, no code coming on as a very strong thing in 2022. I think for the most part that has happened, but at the same time, I'm not sure we've seen anything transformative in that space. At least I don't feel like we have. Sure, we've got a lot of play. John, you mentioned the Power Platform conference got a lot of attendance. I think we're gaining more adoption down that road. But what great achievements happened this year in the low code, no code space? I'm not sure there were any big explosions there.
There's certainly a big focus on it. I mean, that's what you're saying. It depends on how you define it. Right?
See, I'm going to go exactly the opposite way. I'm going to say that the recognition of the fact that low code, no code means much less than what we originally were hoping it was going to be, and the recognition of the need for pro code has become a lot more, right? As we start to look at it, there's a lot more Git integration. There's a lot more pro dev tooling coming out, and we're seeing a lot more of that where it's, hey, when you're doing this low code stuff, it's great because there's a couple of draggy droppy, whiz bang things you can do. But when you want to go beyond that, here's what you need to start learning. And that maturity of this is what you need to start learning, and people approaching it more, I'm seeing a lot more than I used to. It's not just forms, and that's all we're going to do. It's, oh, if we want to wire this up, here's how we're going to have to do it. There is some coding that needs to happen behind the scenes, and there is some work that's being done there. And Paul, I'll let you talk here in just 1 second, like to try and automate some of that, but you also need to have that sprinkling of true knowledge, and you need to be able to have some of that in there as well. It's not just, oh, I tell it I want a thing and that it's completely done, right? It gets you a part of the way there, but the thing I've been seeing more is the recognition of, I need more. I either need a third party who's done it, Eric, to what you're doing, or I need to go off and learn something more.
And I was going to pile on and ask you this question. Is, to me, one of the things that helped low code be successful is the time to market from pro code to polished product. And I feel like that has shrunken to where you can say, okay, I'm going to do this my version of the thing with low code as a citizen developer. But in the amount of time that I can do that, somebody can do a pro code polished deployment into an app store in almost the same amount of time and have it be more easily supported than my thing that I came up with that uses my hacky version of no code. And I'm a big no coder. I love having my hands in both pots, but I feel like that time to market, code doesn't take as long to get a polished product anymore on these mature platforms that it used to, where having a good palette of low code tools could enable you for it.
But it does require a certain more discipline.
Yes.
I got old guy's perspective here. This isn't new. We've been trying to do low code, no code forever. I mean, you mentioned before how big a conference Lotusphere was. Well, I went to those conferences because I did Lotus Notes, man. I wrote Lotus script. And that was a low code, no code environment. That really
SQL.
was.
SQL was low code, natural language programming.
Yeah. But it was, it was all about, you could quickly glue together some workflow and put some business rules together and make things happen. I think you bump into the barrier, and I think you bump into the barrier with a lot of these tools when you try and take this thing and make it portable outside of a single organization. They work really well within a single enterprise. When you need one, you got a well-defined set of requirements and you need to get this one thing done. But when you want to take this out and generalize it, that's when I think it kind of falls apart. That's where ProCode really has to step in and take over. As an ISV, we've gone about as far as we use Power BI actually because there's not so much UI code, we can kind of get away with that. And we've moved to a ProCode environment in a lot of ways. Product. The distribution will always get you, right? It's the distribution and deployment out to multiple locations. I mean, you look at Power Apps, you want to take a Power App and take it outside. Well, you got to jump through a bunch of hoops. But I mean, we've had Norm Young, who's another MVP. He works with us. He's built us out a customer facing portal that's like the envy of the world. I mean, this thing is the most amazing thing. You did it with Power Apps. I didn't know you could do that with Power Apps. So there's obviously a ton of value there. I think you just got to find the right use case.
Well, one of the things that we've seen is, and not trying to be self-serving here, but one of the things that we've seen is a recognition that, and maybe this is to Jason's point, that the shine has come off a little bit and people are looking beyond the promise to the reality of it and saying, yeah, this tooling is great, but we know we're going to need, or we at least believe we're going to need pro code behind the low code arena. Whereas I don't think that was really recognized a year, especially not 2 years ago, where, everything was selling the promise and the sizzle. And now the rubber meets the road and people realize, there's real stuff. It doesn't take you but 15 minutes building Power Apps to realize, holy crap, I need to write some code, right? Now, automation platforms are a little different, right? You can write a lot of Power Automate without ever writing a lick of code, right? And the other platforms are the same. There's a tremendous amount of stuff you can do in Salesforce flows that doesn't require even the slightest bit.
It doesn't take long before you run into JSON parsing, though. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah, JSON
It's
everything
being
is
called
messed up.
JSON blobs because that's when you guys
So maybe it's maturing. Maybe that was the story for 2022, that low code, no code is maturing, right, into a recognized enterprise tool set.
So,
I wanna
would
do a
you
governance
call
tool.
it balsamic or Axure, where it's a good it's landed into a good prototyping and a good small scale tool set, and people can write Excel macros that don't need to be any enterprise ready, and it can be throwaway. And then whenever you decide this needs to be scaled, that you take that business process that you've hammered out and use that as a template.
Maybe.
You just said Excel macros. I think I just threw up in my mouth a little.
Gaves. Let me go with the gaves.
So I want to go slightly a different way, and I want to point out something that's in Power BI that over the course of the past maybe year and a half has come more to light. Right? It's called query folding. Right?
Oh, you are going to dive in.
I am. So the reality of query folding is, you issue. Oh, what is that?
I have no idea.
He's just distracting you.
I don't know.
He's dropping an F-bomb.
I'm on mute.
The reality of query folding is in the olden days, you'd have to write queries to a whole bunch of backend systems, right? In the language of the backend system to pull all that together, to go into a data warehouse, to be able to pull all these things together. With Power BI, you get to write in one language,
Power Query,
and be able to go back, and what's happening is we issue the query in the right language for you automatically, right? It's called query folding. That is where the goal is to be able to accomplish from a no-code perspective is write it once and be able to do all of these things. To me, that's the success story. So, John, I think I went a different direction than you thought I was going to go.
You
right?
did.
Right. So to me, that's the success story of being able to write it once and be able to do all the things in a single language to be able to accomplish. You still have to have a level of knowledge. Writing it in the first place still requires knowledge, right? And you
But it
still
is
have to
low
have
code.
expertise.
It's step by step by step, and you're configuring actions versus, although you can dive in and write the code. But yeah. No, it is a good point. I mean, because it's a gateway. It's a gateway drug to the full code experience, really, because you can dive in and grab that code. Yeah.
So, Paul, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit there, in that I think, and I have seen and worked on some pretty substantial solutions that are enterprise grade, that service tens of thousands of users, that are pure low code platform. Certainly, we built automations that handle some very complex scenarios.
Those would not be the majority, though.
I agree. But however, I think one of the trends, and I'll go ahead and put this into my prediction column for 23, is that we will see more enterprise level solutions built around low code, no code than we have in the past. As people become more comfortable and as those platforms become more capable, we're going to see more, not less, of that happening, because the decentralization away from IT is real and required. And I think the Department of No is putting itself into an ever smaller box.
Thank God.
Yeah, and as well it should. And I think we'll see more of these go forward. The risk, I believe, is overestimating what those tools can really do, and selling, especially CIOs buying into this. Oh, we don't need any developers to build these solutions, right? Because we have pick your low code platform, right? And we know that's not reality.
And you go back to notes. You had the same problem. You had the spaghetti locked in business process code that you couldn't get rid of. All of they work, and then they get too big and they get hard, unmanageable. Then the person who built it leaves, and you're screwed.
And also as we move to cloud hosted resources, the clouds that are providing these interpreters are incentivized to make easily managed things that people can do work, because you're not writing code anymore. You are not writing assembly. You are writing basically you're writing scripts of what, I mean, half the time there's a a GUI version of it that you have to write a PowerShell to implement what the clicks would have been on the Windows operating system. You're writing a slightly interpreted or something that is a low code for someone who prefers writing lines of low code as opposed to clicks of low code. I think the landscape has changed enough. We're doing that, and they're doing it to protect the resources, and that the codes are being turned into low code. I think the code platforms are evolving with the low code platforms to be safer on those now genericized, now not, I didn't buy it and I'm just paying for the electricity. I've got to pay for the IO, the compute, and everything, and that cost goes downstream, and they're not letting you write code on those applications. They're letting you write interpreted code, whether it's low code or Azure.net, anything that runs as platform as a service is not your true compiles down to machine code anymore. So I think they're pairing up and they're moving, but a lot of the reason they're doing it is for system and pricing, as opposed to these people will never write functions that use characters and square brackets. They'll only understand clicks. It has more to do with protecting the system resources and giving people an easy way to do something the way that the providers want it to be.
Makes sense.
So let's talk about our big predictions for 2023. John, I'll start with you. What do you think of the big things we're going to see next year?
Oh, geez. For 2023, well, we talked about the conference of the Bay. I do think that a lot of the stuff is going to return from that standpoint. I think you're going to see a bigger push for the low code. I mean, we're seeing Teams had a huge adoption push, and now we're seeing a lot of that stuff come to maturity, I suppose. It's not necessarily being adopted as quickly. Now we're scrambling to look to, find more value within it. That's why you're seeing Viva. We're going to see a ton more Viva. I'll leave it to you whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Hopefully we can find that, whether it's well defined or not, but we're going to see a lot more attention to that. We're going to be looking to get more value for what we already have. So there might be less of a focus again on well, it depends on how you define adoption, doesn't it? Of acquisition of new technologies, and I think there's going to be more focus on doing more with less. I mean, that's a common refrain, but I think that's the refrain for 2023.
Jason?
Let Paul go first.
All right, Paul.
I was going to agree with Jason, no matter what he said. No, and I think Jason summarized what I think we will continue to see is more and more focus on ease of use of the things we've already built. I think they're going to come closer to the surface. They're going to be fewer clicks away, and we're going to see a lot more investment in those types of technology that makes the stuff. I don't think we're going to reinvent anything. I don't think quantum computing is going to come along and change it to where we have a new 12th dimensional version of data cubes that we just couldn't possibly understand before without that level of CPU. I think we're going to see revolutions on usability and user experience and ease of access.
Okay. All right, Jason.
I think it's going to be a banner year for Power BI. I'll say that.
He's not allowed to say.
Contractually obligated.
Knowledge. There's not much more I can say.
Paycheck valued card. Insert here. Yeah.
I think it's it's going to be a really exciting year. I think there is some revolutionary stuff that will come to light over the course of the next year. I think that Windows 11 is going to be stable and never crash. I think that the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is right within my reach. No, I'm just kidding. The first one is the true one out of the three statements. It's going to be exciting, but honestly, the interesting thing outside of the Power BI space, because I can hypothesize on things I don't know about. I had a really fun conversation with Adam Harmetz when I was in Denmark, and sitting down and talking with him and hearing the thoughts around Viva and the things that they're focused on, I think it's going to be an interesting year in that space. I think that the stuff that Chris McNulty announced, in that space as well, is interesting. Some of the categorization stuff that I'm not really close to today over in the collaboration world. That's going to sort of mesh more together than it has in the past. I think is going to be interesting, and I'm hopeful that we start to see more across the stack, just integration than we have in the past. I feel like we're getting there, where Teams has been bringing it together. The Power Platform side of things is bringing stuff more together. Teams are working more together today than they were 5 years ago at Microsoft. And certainly, I was on a call earlier today. I'll give an example without giving anything away. I was on a call today where we were being shown some very early mock-ups of something that we're thinking about doing. And we had a designer on the line, and we had the PMs on the line, and we had the CAT team on the line. And one of the questions was like, we've seen something like this from another part of the organization. They seem to be further ahead than you are. Are you even talking to them? And the answer was absolutely, yes, we are. This is very fine grained. This is a part of that story, as opposed to, oh, somebody else is doing that. Can you give us their contact information? Because we didn't know.
That's a different story than the past.
It is.
That's what I'm talking about. It really is. You know that inside of the same organizations, people haven't always played nice. So it's kind of interesting. And I'll give one more. I think it's interesting to see Omar Shaheen move off out of the ODSP space and move over to help lead the Word and the new integration in Editor. He did that. He just announced that overnight that he's doing that starting in January. So,
Eggsure?
I'm sorry. Paul just broke up.
I think the audio clipped. Yeah, I may be having a. Sorry, that's why I can't understand.
Oh, okay. So I think it's going to be interesting. You're seeing some seats on the bus move around at Microsoft, and some different leadership coming from different spaces. So I think that's exciting. And they're coming from more collaborative places. So
okay. Well, I'm going to plant my flag in the ground on strategic automation. And I hope I'm right, because we've made an investment in this space. And so I hope it comes to fruition. But what we've seen over the last couple of years, since we've pretty much been focusing purely on the automation stack, is that a lot of organizations, almost everybody, understands the value proposition, knows they need to automate, and has made investments in that area. And yet, maybe hearkening back to the way that they used to do data analysis tools as an analogy, they sort of bought the tools and that was the end of it, right? Turned it over to the business and let them go figure it out. And the business is flailing around with no direction, no idea of what they should be doing. They're working on, nothing is stacked ranked, nothing is prioritized. There's no leadership around this concept inside of the organization. And so I think what we'll see going forward, and we're certainly positioning for that space, or to play in that space, is that automation is going to take the next step up from being tactical to strategic. And they're going to start looking at these investments across the enterprise and saying, where should we be investing our time in automating processes? Where should we be deploying low code, no code solutions to get the best bang for the buck? How can we push them? And this is a huge area that we're seeing, to the forward end of the revenue stream instead of the back end, where it's typically been internal processes that have very little dollar value in terms of bottom line represented within them, right? And moving it to, how can we shorten times from lead to revenue acquisition? How can we make sure we're optimizing those resources that we have, limited as they may be, especially in a potentially downturning economy, and making strategic investments around automation and low code, no code across all platforms, regardless of what your technology stack is. We talk to folks who are Oracle shops. Obviously, we're talking to folks in the Salesforce space. Having done some work over in the IBM cloud space, we've talked to some of those folks, and the story is fairly consistent. Like, when you ask, what is your automation plan for the next year, you just get a blank stare from the CIO. Like, I don't know. We have X, right? Yeah, but what are you doing with it? So I think that's going to be a big mover in the space in this coming year. That's going to start to get more C-level attention going forward, and hopefully that means a better integrated story. To your point of looking not to acquire new tool sets. I think both John and Jason, you touched on this point, but making the most out of the tooling that you have, the investments you've already made to deliver results with the existing resources, because there's just not budget for additional resources or even the appetite to acquire new technology. So that's my big prediction for next year.
And I just to pile onto that and add a little bit. I didn't mention data-driven everything, because data is everything. I mean, that's what's going to be behind all of that automation. I think there's, it's funny. We just went around and nobody said anything about AI. That's awesome. But
I believe we banned it from this.
But that's, the tech, what drives AI? Data. I mean, it's that's how you learn those models. I mean, whether it's true AI or whether it's really just statistical algorithms, whatever. But data-driven everything. And the more we integrate data into the daily lives, the easier it is to automate. That's just the way it is.
Are you seeing more of that? Because I pushed really hard that data-driven design, we should be using data, and it's as part of the agile mindset. When you create something, you should try it and collect the data and then adjust your path based on what the data tells you. I haven't seen that as much as I was hoping to see that over the past 10 years or so. I mean, because we've been talking data-driven everything for a while. So do you see that on your side more than I do?
We certainly see it, but it's in a different area, right? We're seeing it on, like, in our business. We're often selling into comms teams and HR, and they want to know about the effectiveness of communications. They want to know about who's talking to whom, and you can only get that truly from data. And we provide that data. That's why we do what we do. But that's certainly feeding that back, and there's certainly a demand for what we do. So. Yeah, we're seeing, but I don't know about from a software development standpoint, which I think is what you're talking about. I really can't speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, like, user experience has started to show up everywhere. How, and that's not just phone calls about people being angry. That's trying to make things easy for people. A/B testing is there, and where are you collecting that data? Where are you? I would have liked to have seen that more in all of the other methodologies adopting, like everybody seems to have embraced. UX is everywhere. We need to value the customers, the impact on the customer, but that impact should be measured through heavy use of data and analytics. And
I think that's a really good point, John, because as I'm thinking about what you're saying and the thought process there, that actually is what's behind a lot of the strategic automation discussions that we're having. It's how can we take this data and make it actionable, right? In a way that's hands-off, right? How can we better collect the data automatically? How can we action it automatically, right? How can we improve it? And then how can we react to it based on a set of business rules that we've defined? So yeah, really under the covers, it is data driving what's happening, and organizations have gotten better, I think, at collecting the data. And certainly we're looking at a different scale than you are with massive data warehouses and all the stuff that you guys focus on, distilling that data down. But really it's two sides of the same coin, right? You're visualizing data and bringing it to help decision making, and we're trying to automate that decision, right? Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's still coming from the data.
It should be, yeah. Because Jace, without data, you're just another person with an opinion.
Yes, sir.
Well, guys, this has been a great conversation. Appreciate it. As always, once again, we're out of time. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for this episode of the Community Cloudcast. Let's just do our little taking it out here and move on to our final bit of housekeeping to close up. Oh, just a reminder, but Jason has definitely valued his paycheck on this one. Just a reminder that next month we'll be starting our new feature with myself and Rod Bogue. That'll be coming out on a monthly basis as well. And Paul and I have talked about bringing some additional Salesforce content to the channel as well. So we'll be bringing you almost weekly content next year. That's what we're striving for, certainly. So look forward to additional content coming from us. Thank our sponsors, of course, Aptogen, the Bifocal Show. When will your next podcast be released, gentlemen?
Any day now. I sent it in. I haven't heard back from Marco, so I imagine it's coming out either today or tomorrow.
Excellent. And of course, the Dallas Salesforce user group headed up by Paul. I understand you had your holiday gathering
yesterday night. It went great. We did a group with all 5 of the local user groups.
Awesome.
So, yep, that was fun. We'll start back up with meetings next year, and looking forward to doing more multi-cloud architecture stuff with you and with some others.
Yeah, very good. All right, excellent. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you not only next month, but next year.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks.